Welcome to the MixCoach podcast, the podcast dedicated to making you a more skilled and confident mixer. The MixCoach podcast takes both submitted questions from our free members and live questions from our pro members. If you'd like to submit a question or find out how to become a pro member, head over to mixcoach.com/free. Grover Lee says, I'm guessing you have a good relationship with one or more mastering engineers. How much has the feedback from the mastering house shaped the way you mix? Any? Have you had a mix early in your career, maybe suggested for corrections in the mix by a mastering engineer? I know we can do a lot of home mastering ourselves, but I wonder if working with a label has influenced the way you mix for projects that are striving to be radio ready with regards to the level of mastering required. I know the level of sophistication of software is becoming such that many can master on the mix bus and raise the volume to the moon. I assume you don't master all your projects yourself. So is the line usually the client's budget or the scope of the project, major production versus song for grandma? On what basis do you make the decision to self-master or to send to a mastering house? So let's unpack this. This is a very large question. So let's just dive in and unpack. We will deal with them like on a, one question here, one question there, that sort of thing. So how much has the feedback from the mastering house shaped the way you mix?
For me, I remember my first in-house mastering thing was with a guy named Glenn Meadows at Masterphonics several years ago. And Glenn Meadows was regarded as one of the best mastering engineers around at the time. And that's one of the reasons that I went to listen to him. And the thing about it is, I don't think mastering engineers, they're a lot like musicians in the fact that they're not going to say, yeah, you need to lower your kick drum by half a dB. They're not going to be anything like that.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to get the full effect of going to see a mastering engineer, you need to go and listen to your mix in the room, because you'll learn a lot more in the first minute of a song when you listen to it and go, oh my gosh, what was I thinking on the low end? And then you'll kind of mentally make this connection between what you're hearing in there and what you may have thought you heard on your monitor. So if you want the full experience of going to a mastering engineer, at least your first few times, or while you're building this relationship with a mastering engineer, what you need to do is go and listen to it on their monitors and just sit quietly in the corner. And then you may have to ask, what can I do? What are you having to do to my mix that you don't normally have to do? And what they'll probably say is, not a lot, but I did this and I did this, and I thought we could do this, and then you can take notes from that and learn from it. So just sending your mix to a mastering engineer for the sake of learning is not going to get you there. Going to see the mastering engineer is what's going to get you there.
All right, next, I agree completely. Like, whenever I went to my first mastering session, it was the same sort of thing where I'm kind of like just noting on every song on the project, hey, what is he doing on this song? And he was notching out a little bit here, boosting a little bit here. Just kind of note those things in your head, and you go, okay, well, then that means in my workflow there's something that I can alter to make it a little bit better. So just kind of noticing and observing quietly and then asking afterwards, asking some good questions.
And I don't think any mastering engineer, if you emailed them later and say, hey, what did you do? They're not going to keep meticulous notes, because they're not being a clinician at that moment. They're being an artist, and you don't really, I lifted this finger and moved it up to the next string and then slid it up this way, and then I bent it. No guitar player is going to tell you that's what they did, because it's such a muscle memory thing. So going to see a mastering engineer of any kind, even going to a recording engineer who you respect, and listening to it on their monitors, and then saying, hey, what would you do differently? That would be a good experience too. But.
So that kind of answers the next phase of this question. Was it Have you been suggested by a mastering engineer what corrections would be? And I would say the answer is no. It's like you said, you almost have to like ask them and kind of lead them into that zone of to give you some good solid advice, that sort of thing, because they don't want to just send it back to you and go, can you make these changes, and then send it back to me.
The key to it is mastering engineers who are professional and busy, they're not going to send you back to the drawing board because they've lost a client at that time. They're going to try to, a good mastering engineer is going to be a teacher, and they're going to try to grow you and be somebody, and you're going to have to be the one that kind of leans in a little bit and says, what can I do?
Right.
What can I do better next time?
Right.
And I was... Well, I think that's...
So the next phase of the question, it says, he knows we can do a lot of home mastering, but basically, whenever you're striving to be radio ready in regards to the level of mastering required, is it a budget thing? Is it a time thing? Like, how does it determine, does it go to a mastering engineer, or is it like a master as you go type situation?
For me, it's usually a budget thing.
Exactly.
And I almost prefer, it's... Going back to the thought I was about to have, and I forgot about it, was there are more bad mastering engineers than there are good mastering engineers.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And
anybody with the C4 plugin or whatever, or L1 could technically be a mastering engineer. You know.
So I find sometimes that it's just easier for me just to master as I go. And I even talked to one of my favorite mastering engineers, Alan, and I said, I'm not sure this is going to be mastered or not. So how do I need to send this to you if it's not going to be mastered? And he said, send it the way you normally do, which is typically, maybe minus 1 dB, minus a half a dB headroom.
Yeah.
And nothing, if you've heard any of my mixes, I don't think I squash mixes a lot. So I think, if you leave them some room to grow or to get things out of it without having to lower the level too much, I think you're gonna be okay. But my choice is usually it's usually budget. Whatever you're doing on the budget.
I agree.
And if a smart person would always ask, "Are you getting this mastered?"
Yeah.
But I always try to cover my tail, to go ahead and say, "Well, this could be." Either way, it could be mastered, or not. So
well, and it's like most mastering engineers don't mind if you do it that way too. There's enough room usually that it's like they can do their thing. And sometimes like the best mastering engineers that I've come back where it's like basically maybe a tiny bit louder, but they haven't smashed the life out of it or anything. It's a tonal thing a lot of times. So
I think what a lot of mastering engineers try to do, the guys who really don't know how to master that well, they just try to make everything louder, which we can all do that. We can all make it sound louder, but it takes a touch of an artist to go, well, I thought this song didn't need to be this loud, or I thought that we didn't need to do anything on the song. Whenever I can, it's like tuning a vocal almost. It's like if you have someone singing, the last question you want to be asked is like, who did the tuning on this?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's exposed, you tuned it, it's edited, they can't really sing that well or whatever, and you don't want to say, who mastered it? Because usually if you ask who mastered it, it's like, because I noticed it.
Right.
And that's not usually not what you want. So I try to master my stuff as I go, so to where you won't notice it. So.
Right. I think that covers it basically.
Yeah.
The MixCoach podcast takes both submitted questions from our free members and live questions from our pro members. And if you would like to submit a question or find out how to become a pro member, head over to mixcoach.com/free.